My name is Shanna Hollich. I'm a Learning and Training Manager at Creative Commons. I live in the United States, in Pennsylvania. I was a librarian for 15 years and an educator before I started teaching about CC and open licensing with OER full-time. Apologies, I only speak English and I tend to speak it really fast. So if you need me to say anything again, just raise your hand and let me know. I'm also not a very formal or strict person. So if you have questions as we go, just raise your hands and we can take them as they come. You don't have to wait until the end. We're just gonna kind of have a nice time, maybe do some arts and crafts, and learn about these things you see all the time at the bottom of every wiki page that you may or may not fully understand. So, Creative Commons, I need to actually use the thing that flips it for you guys. Woohoo! Creative Commons is a nonprofit organization. We are very small. We have about 20 staff, primarily in North America and Europe, although we have volunteers and other folks from other places in the world. But unfortunately our staff are very Western-based right now. We're trying to expand. And just like Wiki, we have a lot of the same goals. We want knowledge and education and culture and science to be shared openly and equitably to benefit humanity, right? Knowledge is a public good. We want the public to have access. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about how the licenses work. On Wikipedia, for example, you only ever see one of them, but there are actually 6 different CC licenses and a couple of other tools. So especially if you are a teacher, how many teachers do I have in the room? Do I have any librarians in the room? Okay, just me. Do I have anyone who works with teachers? Do you help teachers do things? Yes. So as you know, one of the big goals with Wikimedia and education is to get more wiki resources in education. But we, educators, the people that you work with, the teachers and the faculty are using resources from everywhere. They're not just using Wiki, they're also using things from commercial textbooks, from other sources, from random things they find on the internet that may or may not have various restrictions on how you use them and different copyright statuses. So you probably all already know this stuff, so I'm going to go through it very quickly. The main takeaways to know about copyright is that copyright is global. Almost every country on the planet has a copyright law of some sort. And the ones that don't have their own copyright law are usually have signed international treaties, like the Berne Convention. And the Berne Convention specifically, there's a couple others, but the Berne Convention also outlines some copyright law sorts of things, that any country that has signed the Berne Convention has to have copyright laws that do X, Y, and Z. So some of the things, this is the reason the CC licenses work everywhere, is because 200 countries have signed the Berne Convention, and so they all have the same key things about copyright, which is that copyright is automatic. As soon as you create an original work, you have copyright in that work. Some countries will let you register that work somewhere with an official government office, and then you might get some extra benefits, but you do not have to register anything to actually have copyright. You don't have to write a little letter C inside of a circle to have copyright. You're not, in fact, per the Berne Convention, countries are not allowed to have these kinds of formalities for copyright. It has to be automatic. Copyright also lasts for a really long time. In the US right now, it's life of the author plus 70 years. In Mexico, it's life of the author plus, I believe, 100 years. The minimum per the Berne Convention is life of the author plus 50 years. So anything that you create today, the notes that you're taking right now, for example, the cute little doodles and drawings that you put in the margins of your notebooks, those are all copyrighted. They're your original things that you created. When you take a photo and upload it to Wikimedia Commons, you have copyright. If you make a substantial edit and write something like a whole paragraph of things on Wikipedia, you own the copyright in that paragraph. So what copyright does is it grants exclusive rights to the person who created the work. And under traditional copyright law, only the creator, only the copyright holder can do a whole bunch of things. Things like make copies of the work, share it with your friends, make adaptations of that work. Sometimes we call these derivative works. So if you want to translate your work into another language, that's a thing that copyright says you have to get permission to do from the copyright holder. All of these sorts of things. So, as I'm sure you're already aware, under sort of the regular all rights reserved copyright land, there are large parts of the wiki universe and the internet at large that would be unclear or possibly litigious. There's always copyright lawsuits going on. But the reason we have to know about copyright is that it's what Creative Commons licenses are based on. Creative Commons licenses don't exist without copyright. So it's why I like to make sure people have kind of a basic understanding of how copyright works. When in doubt, if you find something, since copyright is automatic and lasts for a long time, the safest assumption is usually to say it's probably under copyright, unless I see that it has an open source software license marked on it, or a CC license marked on it, or I can see that it was created in 1792 and is very, very old and is therefore probably in the
Public domain.
Public domain! Yay! You don't have to stare at my typing dog, now you get to look at, this is the San Francisco Bridge, combined with the Great Wave of Panagoa, yeah. So again, I think you're all familiar with the public domain. It's kind of where copyright no longer exists, right? It's this magical land of things you can do whatever you want with when it comes to copyright, at least. So things that are very old, things where copyright has expired are in the public domain. Creators can dedicate their work to the public domain. You have seen probably CC0 in use. That's one way they can do it. Some work isn't eligible for copyright in the first place. So things like facts and ideas are not copyrightable. So 2 + 2 = 4 is a thing that I cannot copyright. The idea of a person who takes a long journey and makes friends along the way is not really a thing I can copyright. Now, if I write a specific story where I express that idea in my own words in an original way, then that story will have copyright, the expression of these ideas. If I do some elaborate artwork that says 2 + 2 = 4, but I've done it in some very colorful fonts and I've added some artistic elements to it and it's got a pretty background and I've painted a bunch of things, then my artwork is now creative enough to have a copyright, but that underlying fact, 2 + 2 = 4, is still out there in the public domain, available for anyone to use. The public domain can get a little tricky. I'm not going to get into it unless y'all want me to. Again, I'm in the US, so there's a Cornell University in the US has a number of charts to help you figure out which American works might be in the public domain. Because before we had the Berne Convention, there were formalities that you had to go through to get copyright. So in the US, for example, in like the 1940s, 1950s, you had to register your work. You had to put a little C with a thing on it. And if you didn't renew your copyright, you might lose it. So there's lots of strange things. Other countries also have strange things. I'm not a lawyer. Feel free to talk to any in your own places. I will also make these slides available on the Commons because there are a lot of links in the notes. So if you're interested in like finding all of these fun charts from Cornell, for example. So there's places, there's copyright, there's the public domain where there is no more copyright. There are also other exceptions and limitations to copyright which get very complex and which I'm going to ignore for today. So in the US we have fair use, which is extremely complicated and which nobody else really does because it's not a very good system to figure out whether you can actually use things or not. But again, the Berne Convention says if you're going to have copyright, you have to have some exceptions and limitations to copyright. So the most common exceptions are things like, okay, copyright says you're not allowed to do things without permission from the copyright holder, but if you're doing it for educational purposes, then okay, that's an exception and you're allowed to do it. Japanese copyright law, for example, has a specific exemption that allows classroom broadcasts for copyrighted material. That's great. The US doesn't have that specific exemption. We just kind of guess. In Canada, there's a similar thing called fair dealing. A lot of common law countries have this, across the EU, for example, also. The main takeaway there is that if you are using a work under an exception or limitation to copyright, where there's copyright no longer applies to your use. So, you're in a country where they say, it's okay for you to use this, copyright doesn't apply if you're using it for satire or parody or political commentary. Pastiche. That means that the CC license, which is attached to copyright, doesn't apply either. If copyright doesn't apply to your use, then things on top of copyright, like licenses, also will no longer apply. But again, we're going to keep it really simple today. I forgot to mention, I have more about this at the end, but I typically teach a lot of this stuff during a 10-week online course that we do at Creative Commons. So I'm going to take 10 weeks and do it about a half an hour for you all today. So we're going to skip some things and simplify some things, and that's okay. Again, there are plenty of links and resources. If you want to really deep dive and be a copyright nerd, it's a lot of fun. I recommend it. And I'll have links to help you do that. Exceptions and limitations to fair use, or exceptions and limitations to copyright, like fair use. So this is where the CC licenses start to come in, right? So I kind of like to think of this as a spectrum. If any of you have worked in copyright, copyright law is not always very clear. Law in general is not always very clear. So the answers to can you do things is often, well, where does it fall on the spectrum? There's kind of a spectrum of, well, these things are mostly okay and nobody will take you to court. These things are mostly really bad and Disney will absolutely sue you. And then there's a whole realm of things in between. So I kind of like to think of copyright as this spectrum where you have the public domain on one side where you're good. You can do anything you need to do in the public domain. You can copy, you can share. There is another little caveat where some countries have very strong systems of what we call moral rights. The US does not have moral rights, except in one very, very limited exception. Because the US cares about money and they don't care about people. Anyway, you can talk to me about that at dinner. But yes, so as you'll see, we're going to talk a lot about attribution. And I know you guys, Wikimedians are already so good at citation, and attribution is very similar. You're already doing it. I'm just going to walk you through how we talk about it at CC. So technically in the public domain, there's no legal requirement for attribution as far as copyright is concerned. But in a lot of countries, because there are strong moral rights that do not expire. So moral rights are things like, me as the creator of a work, I would have the moral right to be named as the creator of the work. My name stays with that work forever. Even when my copyright expires, my moral rights do not. So in the public domain, mostly anything goes, but we'll still recommend that give credit where credit is due. You're all doing that already, but when I talk to academics, sometimes they're like, what? Do you mean I Googled a photo and I put it on my slides and now I have to, actually tell people where it came from? And the answer is yes. Sometimes legally, yes. Not just a matter of good, people. Good morals. So public domain on the one side, copyright on the other end of the spectrum, right? Where only the copyright holder is allowed to do things. So pre-internet, you found a cool book and you want to translate it into French. You need to go find the copyright holder of that book, which might be the author. They might have sold their copyrights to the publisher. Copyrights, they're property rights. They're things you can sell, just like objects, which is strange, but that's kind of how we conceive of these things. So you have to find who holds the copyright, and you have to ask them for permission. So you're doing a lot of legwork, tracking things down. And then the internet came along, and people were like, but I can just Control-C, Control-V. I can just copy and paste, and why do I have to figure out who owns this? So there was this tension between, the making it really technologically easy to share. And copyright law is still saying, well, you're not really allowed to do that. So that's where Creative Commons kind of came in, is there's a whole realm of options in between these two things that we thought people might actually care about. So if you see, I mean, you have seen these symbols, I am sure. All of the licenses are made up of like one or more of these four elements, is what we call them, these symbols. So this first one, my friend here in the circle, is our attribution element, CC BY. This means give credit where credit is due, right? Like you need to give my name as the author of the work. It's interesting, as you probably all know, because you're Wikimedians, it doesn't have to be your legal name. I mean, however you prefer to be credited as the author is fine. So this could be your Wiki username. On Flickr, it's usually people's usernames. It could be anonymous. That's okay. But it has to be there somewhere. This one is our share-alike condition. So everything on Wikipedia is marked CC BY SA. Share-alike means that if you do adapt my work, if you make a movie out of it, or you do a translation, or you make anything new that's based on my work, you also need to share your work with a CC BY SA license. This one is our non-commercial, so $ with a slash through it. These start to get more restrictive as we go, so you don't see these very much in the Wiki universe, but you will see them all over. Scholarly publishing, journals, every academic I talk to especially loves to use the non-commercial license for reasons that I think are really good, but perhaps a little misguided, but we can get into that later. So the non-commercial element says, you can use my work, you can do all these things, that copyright says you can't. I'm giving you permission, but you can't do it for commercial gain. You cannot make money off of my work. And then the equal sign stands for no derivatives. You can use my work, but you can't change it. So you cannot edit it, you cannot make changes. This would not work in the Wiki universe at all, right? Somebody wrote a Wikipedia article and licensed it with an ND. No one would ever be able to edit it, and that would be bad. But a lot of creative artists prefer this one. You know, if you write a poem and you have it laid out in a very particular way, and you really want people to make sure, you know, when they're using that poem, you want to make sure that they're using the entire thing, that they're not cherry picking particular words or sentences and changing the meaning, then that might be the license for you. So we have all these different licenses. They all do different things. Also, our two public domain tools are at the bottom here. CC0, of course, lets you immediately put your work into the worldwide public domain, as far as your country allows. The other one up there, the C with the slash through it, is our public domain mark. We're actually thinking about a way to maybe sometime in the future, years in the future, combine those two things because they're confusing right now. The public domain mark is the only one that doesn't actually change the legal status of a work. It's just an informational mark. I only ever see it used by large museums. So like I think the Met will occasionally use this online in their collections. And it just says, we did all the research and we know it's in the public domain. We're sure. You can trust us. So if you see that and it's from someone you trust, great. But otherwise, you can't necessarily be sure. So the main takeaways are that there are these 6 different licenses and the public domain tool, CC0, that open you up to a whole world of content online. This graphic I really like because it kind of shows you all the different licenses. We've got the spectrum now, but top to bottom, right? So we have public domain at the top of the spectrum. It's the most open, you can do anything. Copyright's down here at the bottom. It's the least open. If you want to do anything, you better get permission first, or just hope that no one notices and sues you, which is a strategy some people do, and sometimes it works. I can't legally recommend it to you, but who knows? And then this is where the licenses fall. So, of course, in the Wikiverse, you're really only dealing with this top tier of super open things, because that's kind of the ethos of the Wiki movement. But it can get complicated when you have folks who are bringing in other content and they want to mix it in with some of your more open content. Some of these licenses are compatible with each other when you put them together in the same resource, but some of them are not, and it gets really tricky. And unfortunately is a thing we're not going to get to talk about too much today, but I have a lot of links for where you can go for more help, as well as you can email me. And if we have time at the end, you can ask me more detailed questions, and I'll go over it. But mostly wanted to give you all a bunch of resources. There is a whole world of open content. You are likely already familiar with all of these places. There are a ton more listed in an enormous document in the notes section. And some of these, use a specific subset of CC licenses only. So Wikipedia, again, CC by SA. But many of them will use all of the licenses. Some of them will also have copyrighted material on there. So you have to kind of be a little bit careful when you're out there on the internet finding things to use in your classroom to make sure you know what the requirements are. One of the most important things to remember with CC licenses is attribution. And this is what we're going to play around with a lot today. So I mentioned this a little bit already. Attribution and citation are very similar, but slightly different. So citation is a social norm. It's a thing we do because it's the right thing to do, because you might lose your job or get an F, you might fail the class, you might lose a grade if you don't do it, right? In research and in academia, this is just part of the culture that we know that you're supposed to cite sources. Wikipedia, right? We don't publish anything unless we have a source for it. And so we're going to cite those sources to make sure people know where we got our information from. Attribution is actually a legal requirement. So the CC licenses are legal licenses. They are legal tools. And all of them, if we go back for a second, all 6 of our licenses require attribution, as you may have noticed. They all have that little guy. So that's actually a legal requirement. If you use a CC licensed thing and you do not provide attribution, somebody could take you to copyright court and say, hey, you misused my work and that's a problem. So this is kind of how we recommend you do attributions. The nice thing about this, and actually no one's here, so I'm going to use the computer and see if I can show you some links. If I get in trouble for this, somebody get me out of jail. Okay.
We don't see anything.
I'm getting
How
it.
did you do that? Just touching the computer.
And yeah, I'm going to keep it in English. Apologies. So this is actually from the CC Wiki. So again, thank you, Wiki, for providing some infrastructure that is helpful for everybody, including us. We have some recommended practices for attribution here. And I like to show these as examples, just because I really like this particular example from my friend Tim, who used to work at CC. So, a good attribution will have 4 things in it. We call this tassel. Title, author, source, and the license or legal terms. The good thing is that citations, every citation format I have ever seen in my life as a librarian, always has at least the first 3 things. The title, the author, and the source, especially if it's online, are always there. So once you have a citation, you're most of the way there to doing a good attribution anyway. The only thing you need to add is the license terms. So this is a picture from my friend Tim of some cupcakes. And here we have actually a really good attribution. The picture has a title, we have Tim's name, we've even gone so far as to link to Tim's website, which is cool. And it tells you that the license is a CC BY 4.0 license. So when I come along and I look at this and I want to go reuse this cupcake picture, I know exactly where to get it. I can click, download the picture, and I know exactly what the terms are, what I'm allowed to do. This is an okay attribution. It just says photo, it doesn't really have a title. Not everything has a title, so sometimes your title might just be photo, but Tim's picture does actually have a title, so why don't we use it? He published it that way, why not, keep it? We do have a link to this actually links out to the Flickr page where you can see when it has a title. So our source is there, the link is there, and we have the license here. Here's an incorrect attribution that I see all the time, especially from journalists. If you know any journalists, please tell them to stop doing this. I tell them all the time, I love them dearly.
It's like source Wikipedia.
Yes, you see it all the time. From Wikipedia. And at least there, Wikipedia, kind of wrote it, I guess, as a community. But Creative Commons did not take this photo. We don't own any of your CC licensed content. It's not ours. We don't track it. So that doesn't work. And then there's ways to, we have further examples. I'm going to go back over here.
One question.
Yes?
Is the CC logo itself public domain?
It's a good question.
Because otherwise this wouldn't work.
So, fun fact, the CC licenses, the legal code of the licenses, are all in the public domain. So Creative Commons, the organization, goes away tomorrow. I would be out of a job and very sad. But also, people would still be able to CC license their works forever and ever. Our actual logo and the icons are trademarked, which is a little different from copyright law, but it's similar. It's another type of intellectual property, kind of the three arms of intellectual property: copyright, trademark, and patents. Trademark and patents I don't deal with. CC only deals with copyright. But our logos are trademarked so that they're free to use if you're marking your work with a CC license or talking about CC. We just don't want people to use them pretend that we're endorsing things that we don't want to endorse. And so that's what trademark protects us from. Also means that you should download your CC images from our website if possible, or there's good ones on Wikimedia Commons. But part of the trademark is that they have to be kind of this black and white for accessibility. If you start putting the CC logo in lots of different colors, it violates our trademark and we get sad about it.
Not litigious.
We're not usually litigious. The most we would do is say, hey, you should change that, because this, yeah. But yeah, so they're not, I don't think they're technically in the public domain. The copyright status is weird, but I do know they're trademarked and free to use. The lawyers have opinions on these things.
Would it be
Yes.
in the public domain due to the simplicity though? Because it consists of very basic lettering and shape.
This is a really good question.
So it's okay.
Depends on which judge you ask. So the question was, would they kind of be in the public domain because they're not original or creative enough to have copyright? That is going to depend on which jurisdiction you're in. And in the US, I honestly don't know. They are very simple, which is probably why trademark provides a little stronger protection for its kind of design elements and logos than copyright does for that very reason, right? A lot of logos are very simple, so they might not be copyrightable, but if you want to protect your brand, then you trademark it. The red of Coca-Cola. The color red is obviously not something I can copyright, but they've trademarked it so that you can't use it. Anyway, these are good questions. I have the world's easiest quiz for you next. So attribution, right? This is, again, probably not anything super new. But just in case, wanted to go over it. Here's the world's easiest quiz. Where'd my clicker go? I lost my clicker, so you can't see what I'm doing.
It's near the computer having been.
Yes, okay. The world's easiest quiz. Is this a good attribution? Or is it missing some things?
Missing the
Using the
author.
author.
Anything else? Was
Source.
missing the author? I can tell you that the link, that baby elephants, is a link that will take you to the source.
Okay.
I know you can't tell that from a screen, but I promise it's there. Yeah, So, again, world's easiest quiz. It does not have the author information. This is actually, this picture is by Paolo Cameron, but it has everything else. It also added a little line about how it's a beautiful black and white photograph. I mean, sure, you can add anything you want, just so long as you have the elements people need to see. What about this one? I'm probably in somebody's way. Again, just pretend that the underlined things are links that take you to the thing you think they do. They are actually take you to the source. Cool. Yes, and the nice thing too is that the license link, the license is also linked, and it takes you directly to the page on our website, where somebody who's never heard of CC licensing could click on it, and it says very easily what the terms are. You're allowed to use this thing. In this case, you need to attribute the author, and you need to not make changes. So I can't, substantially crop this image and turn it into something else, or make other adaptations of it. Okay, things you already know. Tons of resources are available. I'll put these links. But essentially what I wanted to do today was something a little more fun. So many of you are working with folks who are going to be combining lots of different types of content. And we do have time, so we can talk a little bit about license compatibility if you would like. But kind of the first step is just making sure that people are sourcing their content appropriately and attributing it. So, if you have a laptop, you are welcome to do this on a laptop. There's an audio thing you can do, although it might be annoying if you don't have headphones to the people around you. But there is this website called Citizen DJ, which is pretty cool, that lets you remix public domain works from the Library of Congress in the US. And you can do different samples. I don't think this is connected to sound. That's one option. Another option is simply something a little easier. So creating or remixing different CC licensed or public domain art or images. You can do this in a Google Slides, for example, or whatever thing of your choice. But I also have fun tools for you. So you can also do this on paper. So up here, in a second, you'll all have to get up and come steal things. I have a bunch of random public domain pictures that I have printed from Public Domain Review, actually, which is another great resource for public domain works. And then I have construction paper of all different colors, and I have glue. And thanks to our Wikimedia Colombia organizers, I now have scissors, because I could not take these on the plane. And I have markers in all different colors. So this is the part where you just get to be a little creative. You can also, again, source images online. I have some links there, some places that I recommend, like Wikimedia Commons. And if you use the things in the room, this is actually super easy, because they're all public domain works for the most part. If you're using things like Wikimedia Commons, actually, this is also pretty easy, because everything is either public domain, CC BY, or CC BY SA, which all play nicely together. There are a few things on Commons that are licensed under some other types of license schemes. There are some GPL things. I do not know how GPL plays with CC licenses or what the compatibility there is, so mix those together at your own risk. But yeah, some of you, now my clicker won't work because I'm not in presentation mode. Some of you, if you went to Wikimedia last year, may have actually done a different version of this exercise with my colleague Jocelyn, where she was focused on open culture. So here's an example of one that I did, just to show you. And you can't see my notes, but I'm going to show them to you actually, because it would be illustrative. So yeah, I put a bunch of stuff together. I made a new piece of art. It's very cool. And it's essentially, well, it's kind of a question whether this really constitutes a derivative work or whether it's some sort of collection or anthology of works. But let's pretend it's an adaptation right now. And so I gave my adaptation a license. I gave it a title and a name so people would know how to attribute me when they use it. And I also gave attributions for all the works that my work is based off of. So there's some public domain things in there, some CC0, and actually I also want it to be really easy, so all of my things are public domain or CC0. So that's what we're going to spend some time doing now. And at the same time, I keep losing my clicker. Okay. At the same time, I can also answer questions. So, that was the time where I ask you to get up, if you're not using your computer, come, grab art supplies, have fun, be creative. When you get there, depending on which printed out pictures you take, I do have the attribution info. I just only have one copy. So I'll like come around and show you where it's from. There's only 3 pairs of scissors, so you will have to share. You're all gonna be friends. If you're not friends now, you'll be friends by the end of the night tonight. Sharing is caring. Yeah. How about it? Fun. Who has questions? Who came in with questions that I didn't answer yet? Because I'm sure there are some. Here, just in case.
So in case if there is a license CC by essay and some authors have 4.2, some authors have 3.2, then what will be the final license if you do a remix?
Yeah. This is a good question. I'm hoping people can grab art supplies and listen at the same time. The question was about, there are different versions of the licenses. Famously, Wikipedia just recently upgraded to the 4.0 version of the CC licenses. Thank you. We've been asking for that for a number of years. But Flickr, until very recently, was still using the 2.0 version of our licenses. And YouTube hasn't figured out how to implement CC licenses at all. They do a terrible job of it, and I'm very sorry, and they don't want to listen to us, so it's okay. If anyone knows anyone at YouTube, let me know. But Flickr just upgraded to 4.0 also after some work with us. The difference between those different versions is essentially differences in the legal code. There have been some upgrades over the years. So the first version 20 years ago, 25 years ago now, 1.0, we realized there were some gaps. So if you know the version of the license, I recommend including it because there are some minor differences. But CC BY has always been CC BY. So the differences are usually pretty minor and only apply in certain jurisdictions. The current version is CC 4.0 when you CC license your own works, which I hope that you will CC license these fun collages you're going to make and upload them to the Commons, because that would be cool. I recommend people use the latest version, 4.0, because it's the most recent and the most complete. The biggest difference between things like 3.0 and 4.0, there's a whole list on our website, but I know one of the big differences was under earlier versions of the licenses, in order to be legally enforceable in other countries, they needed to be specifically translated into that country's legal jargon. So not even just that language, but those specific legal terms. And we had teams and teams of volunteers that would help us do that, which was lovely, but also took a lot of time and was very difficult. So we reworded the legal parts of the 4.0 licenses so that they're, and you'll see sometimes, we used to call these ports. So when you're on the internet, sometimes you'll see this is licensed CC BY 3.0 unported, or CC BY 3.0 Deutschland. Now CC BY 4.0, you'll often see it called CC BY 4.0 International. It no longer requires those separate ports. So we do still have the licenses translated into, I think it's 50 some languages right now. That number might be completely wrong. We do still translate the licenses into many languages just to help people use them and understand them. We are always looking for volunteers to help us translate the license terms into languages that we don't have covered yet. But that's kind of the main thing, is that like the 3.0 and earlier licenses didn't account for some of those like technical international differences unless you use the specific license for your specific country. You had to hope there was a specific license for your specific country. Now,